said I love you, would I be speaking out of turn?
For 47 years, Priscilla Presley kept her mouth shut. She sat through thousands of interviews, smiled through endless documentaries, and watched as the world turned her ex-husband into a myth made of rhinestones and tragedy. She could have spoken up. She could have told the real story 100 times over. But she didn't. She chose silence, and for nearly half a century that silence protected people who had no business being protected. Now, at 80 years old, Priscilla has finally decided she's done. What she revealed recently isn't another tearful tribute to the king of rock and roll. This isn't about his music, his movies, or his legendary performances. This is about what actually happened inside Graceland on August 16, 1977, and more importantly, who was responsible for making sure Elvis Presley never walked out of that bathroom alive. Not directly, perhaps, but deliberately, according to Priscilla, absolutely. You have to understand something about Priscilla Presley. This is a woman who built an empire on discretion. After Elvis died, she could have sold every secret, every scandal, every dark moment to the highest bidder. The tabloids would have paid millions. The publishers would have begged. She had enough material to destroy reputations, end careers, and burn Graceland to the ground with nothing but the truth. Instead, she protected the legacy. She protected Lisa Marie. And she protected people who were standing in the shadows when Elvis took his last breath, people who heard him struggling and did absolutely nothing. That protection ended the moment her daughter died. When Lisa Marie Presley passed away in January 2023, something inside Priscilla shifted permanently. The grief was unbearable, but it was also clarifying. Suddenly, the reason she had stayed quiet for so long didn't matter anymore. Lisa Marie was the reason for the silence. She was the reason Priscilla swallowed her rage every time she saw Dr. Nick give another interview, every time Colonel Tom Parker was described as a genius manager, every time some documentary painted Elvis's death as an unfortunate accident caused by a troubled man who couldn't handle fame. Lisa Marie needed her father's memory to stay sacred. She needed the myth to stay intact. And Priscilla, as any mother would, gave her daughter exactly what she needed. But Lisa Marie is gone now. And Priscilla Presley has decided that the truth deserves to breathe. Let's go back to that day, August 16, 1977. The official story has been repeated so many times that it feels like scripture. Elvis was found unresponsive in his bathroom at Graceland. Paramedics were called. Resuscitation attempts failed. The king was pronounced dead at Baptist Memorial Hospital. Cause of death? Cardiac arrhythmia complicated by his prescription drug use. Tragic, but not suspicious. A cautionary tale about excess. Except that's not what Priscilla saw when she arrived at Graceland that day. She saw chaos, yes. She saw grief, yes. But she also saw something else. She saw people moving too quickly, whispering too quietly, coordinating stories before the police had even finished their initial assessment. She saw items being removed from the house. She saw phone calls being made that had nothing to do with mourning and everything to do with damage control. At the time, she was too devastated to process what she was witnessing. It was only later, in the weeks and months after the funeral, that the pieces started coming together. Staff members who wouldn't meet her eyes, friends who suddenly became unreachable. Stories that changed depending on who was telling them and who was listening. The official narrative was being constructed right in front of her, and Priscilla was expected to play along. For Lisa Marie's sake, she did. For 47 years, she did. But what she knows and what she has finally started sharing paints a picture of that night that is far darker than anything the public has ever been told. This wasn't a simple overdose. This wasn't Elvis losing a battle with his demons in private. According to Priscilla, there were people in that house who knew something was wrong hours before anyone called for help. There were people who heard sounds from that bathroom and made a choice. Not the choice to intervene, not the choice to save him, the choice to wait. Why would anyone make that choice? Who would benefit from Elvis Presley dying alone on that bathroom floor while help stood just on the other side of the door? That's exactly what Priscilla is finally ready to answer. But before we get to the names she's pointing fingers at, you need to understand just how deep the rot went inside Elvis's world. You need to understand who was feeding off him, who was draining him, and who needed him too incapacitated to ever realize what was happening. Because what Priscilla revealed about Elvis's inner circle will change everything you thought you knew about the people the king trusted most. By 1977, Graceland wasn't a home anymore. It was a cage dressed up in velvet and gold. And the people inside it weren't family. They were feeders. That's not speculation. That's the picture Priscilla Presley has spent decades quietly assembling, and it's the picture she's now willing to show the world. Start with the man at the top. Colonel Tom Parker, the so-called genius who guided Elvis's career from truck driver to cultural icon. History has been strangely kind to Parker, painting him as a shrewd businessman who maybe pushed a little too hard. But Priscilla doesn't see it that way. She never did. To her, Parker was a parasite with a gambling addiction so severe that he needed Elvis performing constantly just to cover his own debts. We're talking about a man who booked Elvis into grueling Las Vegas residencies and back-to-back touring schedules, not because Elvis wanted to perform, but because Parker owed millions to casino operators, and Elvis's sweat was the only currency he had. Elvis was exhausted. His body was failing. Doctors had warned him privately that the pace was unsustainable. But every time Elvis talked about slowing down, about taking a break, about maybe going to Europe or doing something different, Parker shut it down. No international tours because Parker, an illegal immigrant from the Netherlands, couldn't risk passport scrutiny. No breaks because the money had to keep flowing. No creative freedom because Parker had already sold the rights to nearly everything Elvis would ever produce. The Colonel didn't manage Elvis's career. He consumed it. And according to Priscilla, he consumed the man right along with it. Then there was the Memphis Mafia, Elvis's inner circle, his boys, the guys who rode with him, partied with him, and swore they'd take a bullet for him. Priscilla knew every single one of them. She lived with them, ate with them, watched them orbit Elvis like planets around a dying sun. And she'll tell you now what she couldn't say then. They weren't protecting Elvis. They were protecting their access to Elvis. There's a devastating difference. Every one of those men had their lifestyle funded entirely by Elvis's generosity. Houses, cars, jewelry, cash. The moment any of them challenged him, confronted him about the pills, or pushed back against the downward spiral, they risked losing everything. So they didn't push back, they watched. They enabled. They handed him water to wash down whatever Dr. Nick had prescribed that day and told themselves they were being loyal. Dr. George Nikopoulos, Dr. Nick. This is where Priscilla's voice changes when she speaks. This is where the carefully controlled composure cracks just slightly. Over 10,000 prescriptions in the final 20 months of Elvis's life. Uppers to get him on stage, downers to pull him off it. Painkillers layered on top of sedatives, layered on top of stimulants, in combinations that no responsible physician would ever authorize. Priscilla has always believed that Dr. Nick wasn't treating Elvis, he was managing a product. Keeping the machine running just well enough to perform, just sedated enough to stay compliant, and just dependent enough to never question why he needed a doctor by his side 24 hours a day. And then there was Ginger Alden, Elvis's girlfriend at the time of his death, the woman who was in that house the night everything ended. Priscilla has been remarkably restrained about Ginger over the years. Almost too restrained. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any accusation ever could. What Priscilla has recently hinted at, without naming Ginger directly, is that the people closest to Elvis that night failed him in ways that went beyond negligence. There were hours unaccounted for. There were delays that didn't make sense. There were decisions made in those final moments that prioritized panic and self-preservation over the life of a man lying on a bathroom floor. Every single person in Elvis's orbit had a reason to keep him exactly where he was. Drugged, dependent, performing, and paying. Nobody had an incentive to save him. And that, according to Priscilla, is the real cause of death. Not a heart attack, not an overdose. A system designed to extract everything Elvis had until there was nothing left to take. But here's what makes this story truly devastating. There was one final phone call between Elvis and Priscilla just days before he died, and what he said in that conversation haunts her to this very day. A few days before August 16, 1977, Priscilla Presley's phone rang. It was Elvis. She could tell immediately something was different. This wasn't the Elvis who called to talk about Lisa Marie's school or to reminisce about old times with that familiar warmth in his voice. This Elvis sounded hollow, distant, like a man standing at the edge of something and looking down. He told her he was tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes you question whether any of it is worth continuing. He talked about the upcoming tour like it was a prison sentence. He talked about the people around him like they were strangers wearing familiar faces. And then he said something that Priscilla has carried like a stone in her chest for nearly 5 decades. He said he didn't think he could do this anymore. Not the music, not the fame, any of it. Priscilla tried to comfort him. She tried to reach through the phone and pull him back from whatever dark place he was sinking into. But there was a resignation in his voice that terrified her. This wasn't Elvis being dramatic. This was Elvis being honest, maybe for the first time in years. She wanted to go to him. She considered driving to Graceland that very night. But their relationship was complicated. They were divorced. There were boundaries now, unspoken rules about how close she could get before someone in his circle shut the door. She told herself she would call again the next day. She told herself there was still time. There wasn't. August 16th unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Elvis had been up most of the night, unable to sleep despite the pharmacy coursing through his bloodstream. He played racquetball with his cousin around 3 in the morning, something he often did when the insomnia became unbearable. By early morning, he retreated to his bedroom suite. Ginger Alden was there. According to the official account, Elvis told her he was going into the bathroom to read, and she fell back asleep. What happened over the next several hours remains the darkest mystery in rock and roll history. When Ginger finally found Elvis on the bathroom floor, it was mid-afternoon. He had been down for hours. His body was already showing signs that resuscitation would be futile. But here's where Priscilla's version departs sharply from the official timeline. She has long believed that people inside Graceland knew something was wrong long before Ginger raised the alarm. Staff members who were awake, people moving through the house, sounds that were heard and ignored. She doesn't claim anyone stood over Elvis and watched him die. What she claims is far more chilling. She believes the culture inside that house had become so broken, so conditioned to look the other way, that nobody thought to check on a man who had been locked in a bathroom for hours while barely clinging to life. And then came the aftermath. Priscilla arrived at Graceland to find a scene that didn't match the story being told. Phone calls had been made before paramedics arrived, not to doctors, not to family, to lawyers, to managers, to people whose first instinct wasn't grief but containment. Items were moved from Elvis's bedroom. Pill bottles were gathered. Conversations were had in hushed tones behind closed doors while Elvis's body was still being transported to the hospital. The autopsy added another layer of darkness. The full toxicology results were sealed by the Presley family for 50 years. At the time, Priscilla supported that decision because Lisa Marie was only 9 years old and didn't deserve to grow up under the shadow of whatever those results contained. But now Priscilla questions whether that secrecy served her daughter or simply shielded the people who contributed to Elvis's destruction. The official cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia. Clean, simple, almost respectable. But everyone in that inner circle knew the truth was far uglier, far more complicated, and far more damning than a heart that simply stopped. For decades, Priscilla accepted the official story publicly while privately wrestling with a fury that never dimmed. But losing Lisa Marie burned away the last barrier between her silence and the truth she's now ready to unleash. And what she said next shocked everyone. January 12, 2023 broke Priscilla Presley in a way that nothing else ever could. Not the divorce, not Elvis's death, not the decades of watching his legacy get carved up and commodified by people who never loved him the way she did. Losing Lisa Marie was different. It was the kind of loss that doesn't just take someone from you. It takes the reason you've been holding yourself together. And when that reason disappears, so do all the walls you built around every secret you ever swore to keep. The legal battles came fast. Suddenly, Priscilla found herself fighting over the Presley estate, navigating accusations and courtroom drama while still burying her only daughter. People she thought were allies revealed themselves as opportunists. Trust collapsed in every direction. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, Priscilla arrived at a realization that changed everything. She had spent 47 years protecting a version of history that protected the wrong people. She had stayed silent for Lisa Marie. Lisa Marie was gone. The silence no longer served anyone except the people who deserved to be exposed, so she started talking. Not to tabloids, not for money, but in private conversations, interviews, and moments of raw honesty that have slowly filtered into the public consciousness. And what she's saying is devastating. Priscilla now believes without hesitation that Elvis Presley's death was not an accident. She's not calling it murder, she's calling it something almost worse. Deliberate, calculated, sustained negligence by people who understood exactly what was happening and chose to let it continue because Elvis alive and suffering was more profitable than Elvis healthy and free. Every pill Dr. Nick prescribed kept Elvis dependent and compliant. Every tour Colonel Parker booked drained another month of life from a man who was begging to rest. Every member of the Memphis Mafia who looked the other way when Elvis stumbled through a room barely conscious made a choice that prioritized their paycheck over his survival. Priscilla isn't guessing at this. She lived it. She watched it happen from the outside after the divorce, powerless to intervene because the very people destroying Elvis had convinced him that she was the enemy. That's the part that breaks her voice when she speaks about it. Not just that Elvis died, but that they isolated him so completely that the one person who might have saved him couldn't get close enough to try. Priscilla believes that if she had still been in that house, still been his wife, still had the authority to fire doctors and dismiss hangers-on and drag Elvis to a real hospital, he would have survived. Maybe not forever, maybe not without scars, but he would have had a chance. They took that chance away from him. And they took it away from her. There's a guilt in Priscilla's words that is almost unbearable to hear. She wonders if leaving Elvis sealed his fate. She questions whether her own freedom came at the cost of his life. Rationally, she knows the divorce wasn't the cause. She knows the machinery that killed Elvis was already in motion long before she packed her bags. But grief isn't rational. And at 80 years old, looking back at the wreckage of a family that has now lost both Elvis and Lisa Marie, Priscilla allows herself to sit with that guilt in a way she never did before. What she wants now is simple but radical. She wants the world to stop worshiping Elvis the product and start mourning Elvis the person. The father who adored Lisa Marie beyond all reason. The son who never recovered from losing his mother Gladys. The man who sang with more soul than anyone who ever lived but couldn't find a single person honest enough to tell him the truth when it mattered most. Priscilla wants that Elvis to be remembered, not the jumpsuit, not the Vegas spectacle, not the tabloid tragedy, the human being who was devoured by an industry that saw him as nothing more than a revenue stream with a heartbeat. At 80 years old, Priscilla Presley is not seeking revenge. She's seeking release. She carried their secrets long enough. She protected their names long enough. She played the role of the gracious ex-wife long enough. Now she's speaking as the woman who loved Elvis before the world ever heard him sing. And she's done carrying the weight of their sins. If this story hit you the way it hit us, subscribe to this channel right now. Drop a comment telling us what you think really happened to Elvis. Share this video with someone who needs to hear the truth. New stories like this drop every single week, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next.